So I join the ministers in thanking the officials, workers and volunteers who helped in the oil spill recovery. I have some excuse for the Minister for Transport. So it took almost 15 hours to complete deploying the containment booms after 400 metric tons of oil began spilling into the sea. I note the minister's earlier reply that booms cannot contain 100% of the oil, and he feels the contractors performed to par. But how much oil had already dispersed beyond the collision site by the time the booms were deployed 15 hours after the collision? And could the oil slick have been better contained if the booms were deployed earlier? So many countries, including the US, have regulations which require containment booms to be readily available in the event of an unexpected oil spill. Does Singapore have any such regulations? And if not, are there any plans to enact them? And lastly, I don't think the minister has fully answered my PQs 14 for oral answer and PQ 67 for written answer, which he said he would cover in a ministerial statement. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I think I have explained earlier in my response to Mr. Dennis Tan that it is not the right way of understanding the purpose of the containment boom around the damaged vessel. But since Mr. Giam raised it again, let me make another attempt to explain. So, the purpose of the containment boom around the damaged vessel is not meant to try and catch the oil that has already been spilled into the sea. Because even if you talk about a shorter response, because the weather was good and it was not at night, and the contractor, the vessel, was able to deploy the booms fully in a quicker way, it will still take several hours at least. By that time, the tidal currents and the waves would have already carried the oil that has been spilled into the sea further away from the incident site. So it is therefore not the correct response to try and use the containment booms to fence in the oil. The purpose of the containment booms around the damaged vessel is as a preventive measure to prevent the further oil spillage from coming out from the damaged vessel. Because as I explained earlier, there's still a lot of oil left that we are now in the process of safely removing from the damaged vessel. So I think this is an important point to clarify so that we are on the same page. And as I explained earlier, then what do you do with the oil that has been spilled and is floating away? The operations are then mounted to try and track and confirm the location of this oil, large oil patches, so that you can then send out other types of vessels, the skimmers, to try and remove this oil, collect this oil, and then also to lay booms in certain areas to try and soak up this oil. But you first need to know where these oil patches are, where it's floating to, and MPA deployed a multi-pronged approach using a variety of information sources. So they use drones, they use satellite imagery, they also use visual sighting from ships. They alerted the ships in our anchorage to try and look out for where the oil patches may be floating to. And then they try to piece together the different information to confirm where is the location of this oil. And when they saw the oil patches on the 15th of June morning, they deployed the oil skimmers to deal with these oil patches. So that is how the oil spill response is done, not just in Singapore, but internationally. The US requirement that Mr. Giam mentioned is not something which is done in major ports. There was an earlier media article who quoted someone, they didn't give the name, they called this person Captain A from the industry, who said that, can we put booms around the vessels in our anchorages? And the article also mentioned that this was done in the Netherlands. But when we checked with the port of Rotterdam, which is also a major port, they said no, they don't have this practice of requiring booms to be placed around vessels, because you have so many ships in our anchorages, and they are not just static, they are also coming in and going out. It is just not practical and feasible to take that approach. So I hope that answers the two questions that Mr. Giam raised. Sorry, Mr. Giam said that he has some further question. I think I was just flipping through earlier and I saw that one of them, Mr. Giam, just to seek Mr. Giam's confirmation, are you asking about the height of the booms, freeboard and skirt? Is that one of the questions that you want me to answer?
That is one of the questions, as well as oral written PQ 67.
67, okay. Thank you, Mr. Giam. Mr. Speaker, for this particular incident, the freeboard and skirt of the boom measured 0.36 meters and 0.43 meters. The wave height at the time was between 0.1 meters to 0.3 meters, and the tidal current was 1.7 knots. We deployed 200 meters of booms. I'm sorry, just give me a minute. Let me just locate Mr. Giam's written question, storage tanks. We have sufficient storage tank capacity with the operations because the storage tanks, when you put it on the vessel, when you go out to sea and you skim the oil, collect the oil, you do have enough capacity, but if you reach, when the volume in the tanks were to increase, you can actually come back to shore and then use a new tank, replace with a new tank, and then you go out again. And we do have sufficient spare capacity. So this wasn't a constraint in this particular response. It was not due to lack of storage tank capacity. What was challenging, and I explained this in my ministerial statement, was it took some time to locate where the oil patches, this is the estimated 400 tons that floated away. It took us some time to be able to confirm the location of this large oil patches that floated away due to a variety of reasons that I explained earlier. Bad weather in the initial period, and after that, nightfall. And in this particular case, because the density of the oil was quite similar to seawater, it could go below the water surface, which then makes detection more difficult. And for these variety of reasons, we only managed to identify the location of the large oil patches on the 15th June morning. And when that is identified, that's confirmed, MPA then sent out the skimmers to collect this oil.
Can I confirm that the Minister said just now in response to my SQ that the purpose of the containment boom around the damaged vessel is not meant to try to catch the oil that has already been spilled into the sea, and that it's not the correct response to try and use the containment booms to fence in the oil around the damaged vessel? If so, what is the purpose of deploying containment booms? The Minister said that how we respond to oil spills can make a difference to our reputation around the world. Does the Minister not agree that the earlier the booms are deployed, the better? Because even if the booms cannot completely fence in the oil, they can prevent a large amount of the oil from spreading faster. And this would reduce the amount of oil, reduce the amount and cost of the cleanup needed. So are we looking to increasing our capacity for faster boom deployment in future oil spills?
Mr. Speaker, I think we're having this exchange. It's not my view versus Mr. Giam's view. What I'm sharing with Mr. Giam is the international practice and the industry's response to oil spills. So these are methods and processes that have been developed over the years by experts, and this is how it is done internationally, not just in Singapore, but also in other parts of the world. So I think this is not an opinion that we are debating over. This is what I'm sharing is actually what is the international practice. But allow me to come back to the concern that Mr. Giam raised, which is the sooner you deploy, the better. No, there's no disagreement that faster is better. However, knowing that boom deployment requires time, even if you are able to do it very quickly because the weather was good, it was daytime, you're able to do it more quickly, it is still going to have a time lag. And I hope Mr. Giam understands that. From the point of the lesion and the oil spilling in a large amount into the sea, by the time the booms are fully deployed, even under the best circumstances, there there will be a gap. And during this time, the oil would have floated away. So that is why the international industry practice is not to try and fence in the oil, because it's not practical. The oil would have floated away, and it's to deal with what is remaining in the vessel to prevent further spillage in case it comes out, because there's no guarantee that the oil will stay inside the damaged vessel. It could spill again. And if in that scenario, when your boom is up, then yes, you will be able to contain that amount of oil, the subsequent spillage, better. But for the oil that has floated away, the international practice is to, as quickly as possible, try and locate where the oil is, and then to be able to scoop it out, collect it. So that was what was done. But as I explained earlier, it took some time before MPA and the contractors were able to confirm the location of the large oil patches. They were only able to do so the next morning, 15 June morning, due to bad weather on the first day, the initial part, and then subsequently because of nightfall. Various reasons made it more challenging. But when they discovered where the oil was, they very quickly deployed the skimmers, the oil skimmers, to deal with it. So there's no disagreement with Mr. Giam that speed is important and faster is better. But I also hope Mr. Giam understands that even under the best circumstances, some tasks are just not possible, not practical. And in this case, it is not possible to try and fence in the oil around the damaged vessel because it has already been spilled and it will be carried by the currents and the waves away from the location site.